Utter disbelief washed over me. My own mother, Helen, sat there on the sofa with Emily's kids, looking more energetic than I'd seen her in ages. This was the woman supposedly too weak, too frail to watch my daughter, Chloe, for a single night. Yet here she was, handling my sister's 3 children without breaking a sweat. My stomach plummeted. The world seemed to pause. Their laughter stopped the instant they noticed me standing frozen in the entryway. Helen's face went white for just a heartbeat before that familiar, forced smile snapped into place. "David, what a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting you," she sang out, giving my nephew a little bounce on her knee. I couldn't find my voice. The check in my hand, extra money I'd brought over to help with their rent, suddenly felt impossibly heavy, like a stone. My gaze flickered between my mother, Emily's kids, and my dad, Robert, who seemed to sink further into his armchair, deliberately avoiding my eyes. "You told me you couldn't watch Chloe because you were too sick." The words finally came out, tight and strained. Silence fell heavy in the room. Helen hesitated, but Emily, ever the defender, jumped in. "She has a lot going on," she said quickly. "We didn't want her to push herself." My temples started throbbing. That old, familiar pressure built behind my eyes. I echoed her words, keeping my voice dangerously low. "She's literally babysitting right now." My mother sighed dramatically, rubbing her forehead as if I were the source of her stress. The sheer irony was staggering. She tried explaining that this was different, that Emily really needed her because raising kids alone is so hard. It felt like the ground vanished beneath my feet. 34 years of playing second fiddle, of being the responsible one while Emily got a pass, all crystallized in that awful moment. I asked her straight out if Emily, who hadn't paid a real bill in her life, who Mom had catered to since we were children, needed her more than I did. The silence was crushing. My father shifted, his discomfort obvious. Emily just rolled her eyes. "And my mother?" She simply shook her head, acting like I was the one being unreasonable. "It's not like that," she protested, but we all knew it was exactly like that. My jaw locked so tight I thought my teeth might crack. It all clicked into place with blinding clarity. My mother's supposed ill health wasn't real. It was a tool for control. She didn't want to risk me stopping the financial support, so she lied. She played me. She let me think she was too feeble to help with Chloe, even for one night, all while gladly taking my money. And Emily knew. She must have always known. Something inside me just broke. All the pent-up frustration, the years of resentment, the constant disappointment boiled over. I told them I finally got it. I wasn't really part of their family, just the emergency fund, the reliable idiot keeping the lights on while they lived their lives, judging mine. Helen gasped, clutching her chest theatrically. I cut her off before she could launch into another performance. "This wasn't fair," she cried. "No," I shot back. "What wasn't fair was me paying your bills for years while you treated me like an inconvenience, believing you genuinely needed my help, when the truth was you just didn't want to lift a finger for me." My mother was a liar. Emily leaned forward, that smirk I despised spreading across her face. She called me overly dramatic, claiming Mom had to walk on eggshells around me because I was so sensitive. I turned to face her, my expression hard. I told her she was pathetic. She let Mom baby her like she was still 16, eating it up because it beat taking responsibility for her own life. "You two deserve each other." Without saying another word, I spun around and walked out. Helen called my name. Emily shouted something cutting. My father, Robert, stayed silent, just like always. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My hands shook on the steering wheel, a burning lump in my throat. The drive back home was a blur of headlights and stop signs. By the time I turned into my own driveway, I knew exactly what I had to do. Sarah was waiting up for me in the kitchen. Chloe was already tucked in bed upstairs. She took one look at my face and knew. "What happened?" she asked, her voice gentle with worry. I spilled everything. Finding Helen babysitting, the flimsy excuses, the final, undeniable proof of what we'd both suspected for years. Sarah didn't look shocked. Maybe a part of her had always known too. She asked me what came next. "I'm done," I told her firmly. "Completely done." That night, I slept more deeply than I had in years. The next morning, New Year's Day, I methodically canceled every single payment I had set up for them. The rent assistance, the utility subsidies, the car insurance top-up, the grocery account, everything. Then I sent one last text message. "You're on your own now. Good luck. And I blocked their numbers. The fallout was immediate and intense. First, a flood of missed calls. My phone lit up like crazy before the blocks kicked in. Then came the emails, pleading, angry, dripping with guilt. When those vanished into the digital void, they started calling Sarah. She declined every call with a quiet resolve that made me love her even more. Finally, Helen went public. A long, rambling post on social sphere about how her heartless son had abandoned his poor, ailing mother. She painted a vivid picture of her sacrifices for me, only to be met with cruelty. I refused to engage in the drama. Instead, I posted my own statement. No tears, no theatrics, just the plain truth. I outlined how I'd been supporting them financially for years, how my mother lied about her health to get out of watching my daughter for one evening, but was fine with my sister's kids, how I was finished being taken for granted. The response was swift and overwhelming. Relatives I hadn't heard from in ages reached out with messages of support. Friends shared similar stories about difficult family situations. Even a few of my parents' neighbors commented, noting they'd seen Helen gardening or out shopping on days she'd supposedly been confined to bed. Emily bore the brunt of the backlash. Her carefully constructed image as the struggling single mother started to crack as people questioned her spending and frequent weekend trips. Then came the inevitable climax, a knock on my door 3 days later. Peeking through the peephole, I saw them, Helen and Robert, standing on my porch looking utterly desperate. My father's face looked worn and gray. My mother's eyes were puffy and red, though I couldn't tell if the tears were real or just part of the act. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Part of me wanted to just leave them there, ignore them until they gave up. But another part, the part that hadn't quite severed the connection, needed to hear them out. I opened the door but stood firm in the doorway, physically blocking their path inside. Helen launched right in, her voice thick with emotion, pleading for us to just talk, reminding me they were my parents. Talk, I said flatly, not budging an inch. My father cleared his throat. Son, your mother is heartbroken. We both are. We never wanted to hurt you. You didn't mean for me to find out, I corrected him sharply. That's different. My mother reached out, trying to touch my arm, but I instinctively pulled back. David, honey, I know you're angry, but cutting us off completely, it's so harsh. We can't pay our rent this month. Power Grid Services is threatening to cut the electricity. Is that really what you want? Your own parents sitting in the dark? The guilt trip was so predictable, so utterly transparent, I almost scoffed. You have choices, I stated calmly. Dad can look for work again. You could downsize. Emily could finally chip in. Or you can keep playing these games and see how far it gets you. Helen's expression hardened instantly. After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat us? Throwing us out on the street? What exactly have you done for me, Mom? I challenged her. Tell me one thing in the last 10 years that wasn't ultimately about what I could provide for you. Silence. Utter silence. My father stared at the porch floor. My mother's mouth worked, but no sound emerged. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Your wire. You made your bed. Now lie in it. I closed the door firmly in their faces. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly free. No more guilt, no more manipulation, no more chasing an affection that was never really there. And it felt unbelievably good. The following weeks were surprisingly calm. Sarah and I took Chloe to the lake for a long weekend getaway. We started seriously looking at houses in a better school district, something we dreamed about for years but kept putting off. I even got a promotion at my job, probably because I could finally concentrate without constant family drama derailing me. But life rarely stays simple. The whispers eventually reached me through concerned colleagues and distant relatives. My parents were spreading stories that I'd had some sort of mental breakdown. Emily was telling anyone who'd listen that I'd always been unstable and obsessed with money. My Aunt Carol called one evening, skipping the usual small talk. David, they're telling people you've lost your mind, she said bluntly. Helen is saying you're having some kind of midlife crisis. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Does that surprise you? I asked her. Not one bit, she admitted readily. I know your mother. She hates losing control. Aunt Carol had always seen through Helen's games. It was why they hardly spoke. I asked how bad things were for them. Bad enough, she replied. Looks like they're getting evicted next month. Robert tried getting his old position back at the building supply depot, but they weren't interested. Emily's been hitting everyone up for money, but folks are starting to wise up. A brief pang of something, not quite guilt, maybe pity, flickered through me. It's not my problem anymore, I told her, though my voice wasn't as firm as I wanted. Aunt Carol was quiet for a beat. No, it isn't, she finally agreed. You did more than your share. I just wanted you to know what was being said. After hanging up, I sat there in the quiet, watching the sky change colors outside my window. Was I a bad son? A cruel person? The doubts tried to creep in. Sarah found me like that an hour later. "Everything okay?" she asked, settling on the corner of my desk. I confessed I wasn't sure. Part of me felt liberated, but another part felt a lingering sense of obligation. She took my hand, her gaze steady. She reminded me I'd supported them for years, giving them far more chances than they ever earned. All they needed to do was be honest, treat me with the same basic respect they showed Emily. They couldn't manage even that. She was right. Logically, I knew she was right. I admitted I worried about the future, about when they were truly elderly and couldn't manage on their own. Sarah squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We'll deal with that if and when it happens," she said wisely. "But supporting them doesn't mean letting them manipulate you. Helping parents is one thing. Being their endless source of cash is another." I nodded, pulling her closer. "When did you get so smart?" I teased. "I've always been smart," she retorted playfully. "You just finally started listening." 3 months went by. Chloe learned to count to 30, a milestone that filled me with more pride than any work achievement. We put an offer on a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood with great schools. Life was moving on. Then the holiday card arrived. It showed up on a Thursday, tucked between junk mail and bills. No return address, but Helen's distinctive handwriting was unmistakable. Inside was a generic holiday greeting card featuring a photo. My parents and Emily with her kids, all beaming artificially as if nothing was wrong. Scrawled on the back was a single sentence in my mother's loopy cursive: "We miss you." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of the hurt caused. Just 3 little words meant to smooth everything over. I dropped it straight into the recycling bin without hesitation. That evening, while Sarah and I were putting up our Christmas tree, the doorbell chimed. I froze, a strand of tinsel dangling from my hand. Sarah gave my shoulder a comforting squeeze. "I'll get it," she murmured, heading to the door. I heard low voices, then Sarah came back, her expression unreadable. "It's your dad," she said softly. "He's alone." My father, Robert, stood awkwardly in the entryway, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. He looked older, smaller than I remembered. His hair seemed completely gray now. Deep lines creased his face. We exchanged clipped greetings. I asked him why he was here. He glanced briefly at Sarah, then met my eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Just for a minute?" Sarah gave me a look, conveying it was up to me. I nodded slightly, and she took Chloe upstairs for her bedtime story, leaving us alone. I motioned toward the living room, and we sat at opposite ends of the sofa, the half-decorated tree blinking silently between us. "Your mother doesn't know I came," he started, focusing intently on his hands. "She'd hit the roof if she knew." That piqued my interest. "Then why are you here?" He drew a long, slow breath. "Because I owe you an apology. A real one this time. Not like the manipulative stuff your mother pulls." I waited, saying nothing. I'd heard enough empty apologies over the years. He went on, his voice gravelly. He admitted he had failed me, not just recently, but throughout my life. He'd stood by silently while Helen blatantly favored Emily. He watched her exploit my generosity year after year and never intervened. He just let it happen. The raw honesty in his tone surprised me. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" He scrubbed his face with his hands, looking every one of his 69 years. "I was a coward," he admitted frankly. "It was always easier to let Helen have her way than to argue. Easier to keep quiet than to stand up for you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't if I were you, but I needed to tell you, you were right to walk away, and I'm proud of you. You had the guts I never did." A knot I hadn't realized I was carrying loosened slightly in my chest. I asked him what would happen to them now. "We're moving in with Emily," he said, a grimace twisting his features. "Your mother's brilliant idea." The irony, he added, was that Emily wasn't thrilled about it. Turns out she didn't actually enjoy taking care of us full-time. Imagine that. Despite everything, a wry smile touched my lips. "Shocking," I replied dryly. For the first time in what felt like forever, my father smiled back. A weary, sad smile, but it seemed genuine. "I should get going," he mumbled. "Helen will start wondering." I walked him to the door, unsure what else to say. He paused on the step, turning back. "Merry Christmas, David. You have a wonderful little girl there. You're a much better father than I ever was." Before I could formulate a response, he was gone, crunching through the thin layer of snow toward his car. I closed the door, leaning back against it, feeling unexpectedly shaken. I hadn't anticipated him ever acknowledging his role, let alone apologizing. It didn't change the past, but it felt like something Sarah found me standing there a few minutes later. "You okay?" she asked gently. "Yeah," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. "I think I am." That night, as we finished trimming the tree, I thought about family. Not the one I was born into, shaped by obligation and dysfunction, but the one I had built. Sarah, my anchor and partner. Chloe, whose smile lit up my world. Even my supportive friends and Aunt Carol. They were my true family. Messy sometimes, sure, but real. We moved into our new house, a comfortable 3-bedroom with a big backyard perfect for a swing set. Chloe turned 4 and had a pirate-themed birthday party that left blue icing smeared across half the kitchen. I heard from Robert sporadically. Short, slightly awkward phone calls where neither of us really knew what to say. Helen, true to form, refused to apologize, telling relatives that I was the one who needed to extend the olive branch. Emily had apparently kicked them out after 3 tumultuous months, unable to cope with their demands. They were now renting a tiny apartment, scraping by on Social Security. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction. They were finally experiencing the consequences of their choices. But another part felt a pang of sadness. Not really for them, but for the lost potential, for the healthier relationships we might have had if things had just been different. One bright Saturday morning, as I pushed Chloe on her new swing, my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "It's Emily. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, conflicted. My sister and I hadn't exchanged a word since that explosive day at our parents' house. What could she possibly want now? Curiosity eventually won. "When and where?" I texted back. "We met at a small cafe the following Wednesday during my lunch hour." Emily was already seated when I walked in. She looked different, less put together, somehow more authentic. She thanked me for agreeing to meet. "What's this about, Emily?" I asked, getting straight to the point. She nervously stirred her coffee, avoiding my gaze. "I owe you an apology," she mumbled finally. "I treated you terribly." I simply raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. She explained how she initially thought having our parents move in wouldn't be so bad. Maybe they'd help with her kids, contribute something. But they just expected me to wait on them hand and foot. Mom criticized my cooking, my parenting, how I kept the house. Dad just parked himself in front of the TV all day. "Sounds vaguely familiar," I interjected dryly. She nodded, looking genuinely embarrassed. For the first time, she said, she actually understood what I'd put up with for years. It was completely exhausting. After 3 months, she reached her breaking point. "So you kicked them out," I stated. "I had no choice," she insisted. "They were making my life impossible." I leaned back, observing my sister. There was a change in her demeanor, a hint of humility I'd never witnessed before. "So why tell me all this now?" I asked. She sighed, finally meeting my eyes directly. "Because you were right," she admitted quietly. "About all of it. Mom always favored me. I absolutely took advantage of you. I let you shoulder everything because it was easier than facing how messed up our family was. And I am so sorry. Truly." I wasn't sure what I'd expected from this meeting, but genuine contrition wasn't it. Emily had never apologized to me for anything in our 34 years. "I appreciate you saying that," I told her carefully. "But one apology doesn't magically fix decades of history." "I know that," she agreed quickly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me overnight. I needed you to know that I see it now, what they did to you and what I let happen. I'm trying to do better. For my own kids," her last words resonated. "For my kids." Despite everything, Emily was a mother trying to break a toxic pattern. "Are you still talking to them?" I found myself asking. "On my term," she said. "Mom is, well, Mom. She's never going to change. But I'm setting firm boundaries now. No more constant babysitting demands. No more loans. No more guilt trips." I nodded slowly, recognizing that struggle. I asked about her children, the question feeling surprisingly natural. Emily's face softened, some tension leaving her shoulders. They're doing well, she said. "Keeping me busy. Jason started first grade. Maya is obsessed with basketball. They ask about their cousin Chloe sometimes." An uncomfortable silence hung between us. 34 years of baggage couldn't be unpacked over 1 cup of coffee. "Look, Emily," I said eventually, "I can't promise we'll suddenly be best friends. There's a lot of hurt there. But maybe we could try starting over, like adults this time, without dragging all the old stuff into it." Emily nodded, her eyes looking suspiciously moist. "I'd really like that," she whispered. We chatted for another 15 minutes about safe, neutral things. Her job search, my new house, the ridiculous price of gas. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it felt like a tentative first step. As we got up to leave, she paused. Thank you again, she said earnestly, for meeting me, and well, for finally standing up to them. If you hadn't done that, I don't know if I ever would have seen things clearly. I gave her a slight nod, not quite ready for "you're welcome," but acknowledging her sincerity. Walking back to my office building, I felt strangely lighter. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, it wasn't, and maybe never would be, but because I'd finally escaped the orbit of those old, destructive family patterns. I wasn't the designated ATM anymore. I wasn't the overlooked son desperate for approval. I was just David, husband, father, individual, finally charting his own course. That night, tucking Chloe into bed, she looked up at me with Sarah's thoughtful eyes. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily, "are you happy?" I kissed her forehead, inhaling the familiar scent of her shampoo. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered back. "I really am." And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, it was the absolute truth.